I still can't believe I saw that dessert. There it was, right in front of us, on a pristine white plate, the words "Say Yes" written in elegant white frosting. Except, the woman sitting across from me, the one who'd probably ordered it weeks ago, was no longer my girlfriend. She was standing next to the table, her face a mask of utter mortification, eyes darting between me, the dessert, and the clearly confused waiter. That Valentine's Day dinner was, without a doubt, the most surreal night of my entire life. It was February 14th, in a fancy Italian restaurant in Austin's Soco district. We were supposed to be celebrating our engagement. Olivia, my girlfriend of 2 years, thought she had successfully manipulated me into proposing. She was wrong. And that dessert? It was the final, ridiculous flourish on a breakup she absolutely did not see coming. To understand how I ended up orchestrating what felt like a scene from a dark comedy, we need to rewind a bit. My name's Ethan, I'm 32. I never thought I'd be telling a story like this online. But here we are, because this whole situation was so absurd, I still can't quite believe it actually happened. It all started about 2 years ago, at my cousin's wedding in downtown Austin. One of those huge events, 300 guests, open bar, a DJ who thought that Cupid Shuffle was peak entertainment. I was near the bar, expertly dodging my aunt's insistent questions about my single status, when this absolutely stunning woman walked up and ordered a vodka cranberry. Her name was Olivia Hayes. She was 29, a marketing executive for some tech startup, and she had this incredible presence that made heads turn. We started talking, she laughed at my terrible jokes about the wedding cake, and by the end of the night, we were dancing to songs we both secretly loved. It felt like something out of a romantic movie. The first year with Olivia was genuinely fantastic. We traveled everywhere, Atlanta, New Orleans, even a long weekend in Denver. We'd stay up late, talking about everything from existential philosophy to our favorite childhood cartoons. The physical chemistry? Off the charts. She had this apartment in Hyde Park with huge windows overlooking the city, and I had my place in South Congress. We didn't live together, but we were practically inseparable. Her friends adored me, mine thought she was gorgeous and fun. My mom? She was already dropping hints about grandchildren every Sunday dinner. Everything felt perfect. Or at least, that's what I kept telling myself, even as the first red flag started to flutter around our 1-year anniversary. Looking back, I should have asked myself, how often do we ignore warning signs in a relationship because we're just too invested to see them clearly? The marriage hints started small. Olivia would send me Instagram posts of engagement rings with captions like "just browsing," or she'd point out couples getting engaged at restaurants, her eyes wide with a look that honestly made me uncomfortable. Then her best friend got engaged, and suddenly, every conversation became about weddings. She started buying bridal magazines, leaving them on my coffee table when she stayed over, always claiming it was just for fun. I tried to rationalize it. We'd been together over a year, she was 29, so of course, marriage was on her mind. But it began to feel less like natural progression and more like a calculated campaign. The hints escalated into direct conversations. She'd ask when I thought people should get engaged, what kind of wedding I'd want, how many kids I saw myself having. And every time I tried to pump the brakes, tried to say I wasn't ready to think about that yet, her mood would completely shift. From laughing and happy to cold and distant in about 5 seconds flat. Sometimes she'd tear up, saying I didn't take our relationship seriously. Other times, she'd just go silent and leave my apartment without a word. The crazy part? The next day, she'd text me good morning with heart emojis and suggest dinner, acting like nothing had happened. It was then I started realizing Olivia had this pattern of emotional instability: blow up, make me feel like the bad guy, then reset everything and expect me to just move on, without ever resolving the actual issue. Her ex-boyfriend, Marcus, started coming up more frequently around the 15-month mark. At first, I thought she was just being open about her past. But then I noticed she only mentioned him when we were fighting about commitment. Marcus wanted to marry me, she'd say. Or, Marcus would have proposed by now. I'd just sit there, wondering why she kept comparing me to a guy she supposedly didn't want anymore. I did some light social media stalking, because I'm only human. Turns out Marcus was this successful real estate developer, drove a luxury car, wore expensive suits in all his photos, and still followed Olivia on Instagram, liking most of her posts. The whole thing gave me a sick feeling. It seemed less like she was over him, and more like she was keeping him as a backup plan. Around month 18, things got worse. Olivia started visiting wedding venues. She'd come back and tell me about this beautiful barn in Oklahoma or an elegant ballroom downtown. I felt like I was being pulled into a current I couldn't escape. One night, at her apartment, I tried to have an honest conversation. "I care about you," I said, "but I'm not ready to think about marriage yet." She completely lost it. Crying, yelling that I was wasting her time, that she could be with someone who actually valued her, that her biological clock was ticking, and I was being selfish. I sat on her couch, feeling like the villain in a movie I hadn't auditioned for. When I tried to defend myself, she just cried harder and said I didn't understand what it was like to be a woman approaching 30. The next morning, it was the same old text, "I'm sorry. I love you." And a suggestion for brunch. That's when I truly understood, this pattern was never going to change, not unless something drastic happened. But I loved her, or thought I did, so I kept going, stupidly hoping things would get better. Then came the night that changed everything. And honestly, I should have seen it coming. Olivia had been extra sweet all week, cooking at my place, being affectionate, not mentioning marriage once. I actually thought we might have turned a corner. It was a cold January night, just us at my dining table, eating spaghetti she'd made. Everything felt normal. Then she looked at me with this completely calm expression and said, "I need to tell you something important." My stomach immediately dropped. I knew, just knew, whatever was coming wasn't good. She put down her fork, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "If you don't propose to me by Valentine's Day, I'm going back to Marcus." The room went silent, save for the frantic pounding of my own heart. I sat there, frozen for a moment, trying to process it. This wasn't a discussion. This was an ultimatum, delivered with the casual air of a business negotiation. She explained Marcus had been texting her, saying breaking up was the biggest mistake of his life, that he was ready to propose whenever she wanted. She said all of this, looking at me like she expected me to panic, to immediately pull out a ring. I could see in her eyes she thought this was a brilliant strategy, that threatening me with her rich ex would make me realize what I was about to lose. But instead, something completely different happened inside my brain. I looked at her, sitting there, so confident and satisfied. A wave of clarity, so intense it felt physical, washed over me. I realized this woman didn't love me. She was trying to trade me like a stock that wasn't performing well enough. The thought kept running through my mind, if someone truly loves you, they don't threaten to leave you for someone else unless you marry them. They don't use another person as leverage to manipulate you into the biggest decision of your life. And they definitely don't set arbitrary deadlines like you're some kind of work project. I took a deep breath. "That's fair," I said. Her face lit up with a triumphant smile. She thought she'd won. She thought I was agreeing, that a proposal was inevitable. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand, chattering about how she knew I'd understand, how happy we'd be, how perfect Valentine's Day would be for an engagement. I just sat there, nodding, my brain already 3 steps ahead, planning something entirely different. The rest of dinner was surreal. She was buzzing about wedding ideas and honeymoon destinations, while I was having this intense internal conversation, figuring out exactly what I was going to do. Have you ever had one of those moments? Where all the confusion suddenly evaporates, and you see everything with perfect clarity? I wasn't thinking about buying a ring. I was thinking about how fundamentally messed up it was to receive an ultimatum from someone who claimed to love me. The phrase that kept repeating was, I wasn't being chosen, I was being forced. Once I thought it, I couldn't unthink it. It was so obviously true. Olivia didn't want to marry me specifically, she wanted to get married before she turned 30, and I was just the guy who happened to be there. If I didn't comply, Marcus was waiting, like an understudy. I realized that if I proposed under these conditions, I'd be walking into a marriage that started with emotional blackmail. That would set the tone for the rest of our lives, because she'd know threatening me was an effective tool to get whatever she wanted. That night, after I drove home, I sat in my living room until 3 a.m., thinking through every possible outcome. I concluded I had to end this. But it had to be clean. Final. I knew Olivia well enough to know that if I just broke up with her over text, or at one of our apartments, she'd cry, she'd manipulate, she'd promise to change. And I'd probably cave, because I'm not great with emotional confrontation. I needed to do it in a public place where she couldn't make a huge scene, somewhere neutral. And that's when the idea hit me. Valentine's Day was 3 weeks away. Olivia was expecting a proposal at a nice restaurant. So, why not give her the nice restaurant and the public setting, just not the outcome she was anticipating? The more I thought about it, the more perfect it seemed. She'd be so focused on getting engaged, she wouldn't see the breakup coming. By the time she realized what was happening, it would already be done. Over the next 3 weeks, Olivia was the happiest I'd ever seen her. She genuinely believed she'd manipulated me into proposing. Watching her in that delusional bubble of confidence was almost sad. She got her nails done in a specific shade of pink she said would photograph well with a ring. She left little notes around my apartment with her ring size. She told all her friends something big was happening on Valentine's Day. She bought a new red dress, probably $400, and even made a hair appointment at a fancy salon for that morning. Meanwhile, I was systematically removing myself from her life in ways she didn't notice. I took all my stuff out of her apartment, a few items each time, so she wouldn't get suspicious. I changed my Netflix and Amazon passwords, made sure my name wasn't on anything of hers. I even called my buddy Alex, a lawyer, and asked him, hypothetically, if there was anything legal I needed to worry about. He told me as long as we didn't live together and had no shared assets, I was fine. What a relief. The hardest part was booking the restaurant. I wanted somewhere nice enough she'd believe a proposal was happening, but not so expensive I'd regret it when I broke up with her instead. I settled on Giovanni's in the Soco district, white tablecloths, dim lighting, known for romantic dinners. When I made the reservation, the host asked if we were celebrating anything special. Something like that, I replied, which felt darkly funny. I also told my brother what I was planning, just in case Olivia tried to spin some crazy story afterward. He thought I was insane, but also said if I was going to do it, at least make it memorable. I guess I took that to heart. The week before Valentine's Day, Olivia was extra sweet, extra affectionate. She kept saying she couldn't wait for our special day with this knowing smile that made my skin crawl. She had no idea I'd already mentally ended the relationship. There was something almost peaceful about having made the decision, all the anxiety and pressure just evaporated. Valentine's Day finally arrived. Olivia texted me early, "Today is going to be perfect," with about 15 heart emojis. I just responded with a simple "see you tonight." I didn't want to lie, but I also didn't want to tip her off. She spent the entire day getting ready. Spa, elaborate curls, the red dress, expensive heels. When I picked her up at 6:30, she looked stunning and utterly convinced she was about to get engaged. The drive to the restaurant was torture. She talked about how romantic the night would be, how she'd always remember this day, how grateful she was I'd finally come around to her timeline. I just gripped the steering wheel, focused on the road. We pulled up to Giovanni's. The valet took my car. As we walked toward the entrance, Olivia grabbed my arm and whispered, "This is perfect." And I thought, she's right. It really is perfect. Just not in the way she imagines. The hostess led us to a corner table, probably the most romantic spot in the restaurant, with flickering candles and a perfect view of the city lights. Olivia was practically glowing with anticipation. She kept looking at me with expectant eyes, like she was waiting for me to drop to one knee right there, before we even ordered drinks. I saw her hands tremble slightly as she picked up the menu, pretending to read it, but I knew she wasn't processing a single word. The waiter came for our drink orders. Olivia got champagne, of course. I ordered a beer, something to keep me grounded. When the waiter left, she reached across the table, put her hand on mine, and started talking about how long she'd been thinking about this moment, how we were meant to be, how Valentine's Day was always her favorite holiday. I just nodded along, mentally rehearsing what I was going to say. The appetizers came out about 15 minutes later, some fancy bruschetta that Olivia barely touched, too nervous and excited. I ate mine slowly, knowing that once these plates were cleared, everything was about to change. I waited until the waiter took them away, promising the main courses in about 10 minutes. That's when I made my move. The timing needed to be perfect. I reached across the table and took both of Olivia's hands. Her eyes immediately filled with tears of joy. She thought this was it. This was the moment she'd been manipulating me toward for months. She was already starting to smile, that huge, engaged girl smile I'd seen 1,000 times on Instagram. I took a deep breath. "Olivia," I said, "I need to tell you something important." She nodded enthusiastically, like, yes, yes, say it. "Ask me, I looked her right in the eyes. "I don't want to marry you. I never want to marry you. And this relationship is over." I watched her face go through about 5 different emotions in 2 seconds. First, confusion, like she didn't understand the words. Then shock, as the meaning sank in. Then disbelief, like surely, this was some kind of joke. Then anger, as she realized I was completely serious. And finally, this raw devastation that almost made me feel bad, except I remembered why I was doing this. She pulled her hands away like I'd burned her and just stared at me, mouth open. For about 10 seconds, she didn't say anything, the longest I'd ever seen her go without talking. Then the questions started pouring out in a frantic stream, "What do you mean? Is this because of the ultimatum? Is there someone else?" I calmly explained that you don't threaten someone with their replacement if you actually love them. I told her the moment she gave me that ultimatum about Marcus, she'd shown me exactly what I was worth to her, and that worth was conditional, came with a deadline, like a business contract. I said marriage should come from love and mutual choice, not blackmail and manipulation, and I refused to start a life with someone who'd already proven they'd use emotional pressure to get what they wanted. Olivia's face went from pale to bright red. She started getting loud. Not quite yelling, but definitely loud enough that the couple at the next table glanced over with concern. She said I'd wasted her time, that I'd led her on, that I'd promised her a future. I just sat there, thinking how none of that was true. I'd never promised anything except to be honest about my feelings. She accused me of planning this whole thing just to humiliate her. Honestly, she wasn't completely wrong. I definitely could have broken up with her privately. But I also knew doing it publicly meant she couldn't guilt me into staying or manipulate me with tears in the privacy of one of our homes. The waiter approached, looking uncomfortable. He could tell something was wrong. He asked if everything was okay. I said we were fine, and asked if he could bring out any dessert that might have been ordered ahead of time. Olivia looked at me, confused, having no idea what I was talking about. But I had a strong suspicion, based on her earlier confidence, that something special was waiting in the kitchen. The waiter nodded slowly and disappeared, looking relieved to escape the tension. Olivia stood up from the table. "You're going to regret this," she said, with a venom in her voice I'd never heard. She grabbed her purse, her hands shaking as she pulled out her phone. I assumed she was calling an Uber. There was no way she'd sit through dessert with me now. She stood there for what felt like an eternity. Neither of us said another word. Then, the waiter came back out, carrying a small plate with what looked like a custom chocolate dessert. As he got closer, I could see words written across the top in elegant white frosting. He set it down. And there they were, "Say yes." Staring up at both of us. The whole situation became so utterly absurd that I almost started laughing. Olivia had apparently pre-ordered this dessert weeks ago, probably right after she gave me the ultimatum, assuming I'd proposed during dinner. It was meant to be the perfect moment to celebrate our engagement. The waiter stood there, deeply confused as to why a couple clearly breaking up had an engagement dessert. Olivia's face went from angry to completely mortified as she realized what had just happened. I looked at the dessert, then at her, and said, "Well, that's really something." I could see her trying to decide whether to run out of the restaurant immediately or try to salvage some dignity. She chose to leave. She turned and walked as fast as she could in those expensive heels toward the exit. I sat there alone at the table with this say-yes dessert and the attention of half the restaurant on me. The waiter came back and asked if I still wanted the check. "Yes, please," I said, and apologized for the scene. He actually laughed and said he'd seen much worse breakups during his years at Giovanni's, which made me feel slightly better. The bill came out to $147. A small price to pay for my freedom. I left a $40 tip. That waiter definitely earned it. I drove home in complete silence. No music, no phone calls, just me and my thoughts processing what had just happened. When I got back to my apartment, I felt this overwhelming sense of relief, like I'd just escaped something terrible. Olivia started texting me around 10 that night. First, angry messages about how I'd humiliated her. Then sad messages about how we could work things out. Then threatening messages about how I'd ruined her life. I read the first 10 just to make sure there wasn't anything urgent, then blocked her number. I was done with the drama. I later found out through a mutual friend that Olivia told everyone I cheated on her, which wasn't true. But most of our friends saw through her version, having witnessed her behavior patterns over the years. That same friend told me Olivia had gone back to Marcus within a week of our breakup. Which, honestly, just proved my point. She didn't need time to grieve, she just moved laterally to her next option, just as I'd predicted. The aftermath was quieter than I expected. I braced myself for more drama, but apparently, Olivia was too busy with Marcus to keep focusing on me. My life slowly returned to normal. I started going out with friends without worrying about her reactions, focused on my work, even went on a few casual dates. About 6 months later, that same mutual friend reached out and told me something that made the whole experience feel almost poetic. Apparently, Olivia had pulled the exact same ultimatum move on Marcus. She'd given him a deadline to propose, or she'd leave, probably using me, or some other guy, as the threat this time. And here's the kicker, Marcus broke up with her, too. Because nobody wants to be manipulated into marriage, regardless of how much they might care about someone. I never reached out to Olivia again. And I never regretted my decision. Looking back, my only regret is not ending it sooner, when the red flags first started appearing. The whole experience taught me something valuable about relationships and self-respect that I wish I'd understood earlier. Someone who truly loves you will never force you to prove it on their timeline, with their conditions. And they definitely won't threaten to replace you if you don't comply. Walking away from manipulation is always the right choice, even when it's hard, even when you're invested, even when everyone thinks you should just keep the peace. There's a difference between compromise in a relationship and surrendering your agency. I'd crossed that line so many times with Olivia that I'd almost forgotten what healthy boundaries looked like. That Valentine's Day dinner cost me $147 and a 2-year relationship. But it bought me something infinitely more valuable, my self-respect, and my freedom to choose a partner who wants to build a life with me, not someone who wants to force me into one. There's only one thing more expensive than leaving a toxic relationship, and that's staying in one, paying for it with years of your life you'll never get back. And I'm grateful every day that I chose the cheaper option. Do you think I handled that situation the best way, or was my public breakup too harsh?